Learn English through Stories K5 PDF. Adapted and modified by Kulwant Singh Sandhu. Contents: Cheeky Charlie. Chapter 3. Treasure. Chapter 3. Treasure. Not long after the tattoo incident, Charlie was in trouble again. Big trouble. And this time Dad wasn't laughing one little. You need to know that Charlie had become obsessed with pirates. He had books about pirates, DVDs about pirates, even a scratchy pirate costume with an eye patch that he wore to preschool. He even talked like a pirate. More cornflakes, P. Hardee's, he'd shout at breakfast. Yo-ho and a bottle of yum, he'd yell at lunch. I'm burying the treasure, he'd declare at dinner, when Mom caught him trying to push his peas under the baked potato skins. The sun that had been shining when Charlie colored red's back had gone. Day after day, the rain tipped down, filling the builder's holes with brown, muddy water. To Charlie, this was just another pirate adventure waiting to happen. As soon as the rain stopped and Mom opened the back door, Charlie rushed into the garden. I'm off to find the treasure, he shouted, his slightly too big pirate hat sliding off his head. Come on, Harry, let's find the treasure. No thanks, I said. It's wet, cold, and muddy, and there's no treasure in our garden. But he wasn't listening. Pirate Charlie crossed the gangplank. I heard him shout. He wobbled his way across the trenches and rushed off up the garden, waving his toy spade. I went inside to watch telly. A few minutes later, I heard Mom in the kitchen. Charlie, just look at the state of you. What on earth have you been doing? Charlie mumbled something I couldn't hear. But that's not treasure, darling, it's an old flower pot. I laughed. Brothers can be so stupid. And that's a bit of glass, you shouldn't even be playing with that. And that's... Hang on, what is that? Said Mom. Let's give it a wash and see. That sounded more interesting. I walked through to the kitchen where Charlie was standing on the stool at the sink. His arms were crusted with brown mud. His shorts were wet right through, and he had a big smear of mud on his face too. Probably because he'd been picking his nose. What's that, Mom? I asked. Is it money? It's my treasure, said Charlie, looking pleased. Mom was holding a big brown coin, rubbing it and peering closely. Hey Charlie, you're right, it is treasure, it's an old penny. What, 1 penny? I said. Just one? Yes, but it's nearly 80 years old, replied Mom. Charlie, that's brilliant, well done. Wow, Charlie, that's amazing, I said. You found one, you're so clever, I've got 8 type in my piggy bank. If you can't say anything nice, Harry, then don't bother, said Mom. I went back to the telly. That evening, Dad made a massive fuss of my brother, telling him he was a tip-top pirate and an expert treasure finder. They rolled around on the carpet shouting, ha-ha, and being idiots. I couldn't stand it. Shush, I shouted. I can't hear the telly. Oh, said Dad, one of the crew is revolting. Shall we throw her overboard? He tried to grab me, but I was too quick and ran out of the room. He can be so annoying. The next day, Charlie rushed out into the garden after breakfast. The builders still weren't back, so he had the whole muddy place to himself. Very soon, his pirate outfit was ruined, his hat had fallen into a puddle, and he'd lost his eye patch. He won't be wearing that again for World Book Day. But the hunt went on, and he poked around with his spade in every nook and cranny, muttering P. Hardee's to himself. More than once, he ran in excitedly to show Mum his loot. That's a bottle top, said Mum the first time. That's an old piece of string, said Mum. Not sure we'll get much for that. That's, ugh, Charlie, what is that? It stinks, she said, taking the next dirty object out of Charlie's grip. Oh, Charlie, that's an old chicken bone or something. It was probably left by a fox. Not a chicken bone is a dinosaur, said Charlie. From a pirate dinosaur, rug. That disgusting thing is not staying in this house a moment longer, said Mum. I thought she meant Charlie for a moment. It's time to come in and get yourself cleaned up. That afternoon I played in my room while Charlie stomped around the house. Sometimes I'd hear Mum shout for him, and every time he'd be in a different room, I ignored him, especially when he wanted someone to wipe his bottom. Yuck. After Dad got home, Charlie sneaked back into the garden again. He was back suspiciously quickly. I finded more treasure, he declared. What have you got there, little fella? Said Dad. Charlie opened up his grubby fist to reveal a not very dirty medal, still with the ribbon attached. I recognized it straight away. That's Granddad's. I said. You're not supposed to touch those, is he, Dad? I said. Mom, who was watching, disappeared into the hall without a word. Have you been rummaging in our bedroom, Charlie? Charlie stood there, his head hanging down, saying nothing. Charlie, this is serious. Tell Daddy what you've been up to. I don't know why Dad was asking. Charlie had taken Granddad's medal and pretended to find it. It actually belonged to Dad's granddad, who got it when he won an airplane fight in a war. He's dead now, which is why we have it, along with 2 other medals he won in other fights. He was a good fighter, my dad says, which is a bit weird because fighters get sent to the head teacher at my school. Mom was standing at the door, holding Granddad's blue medal case. She opened it up and showed it to Dad. Empty. Okay, Charlie, let's go. You need to show me where the medals are. Can I look? I asked. No, you stay here, said Dad. I'm sure we'll be back in 5 minutes, won't we, Charlie? Charlie didn't look sure at all, but they put on their wellies and went out into the garden. By now, it was almost dark. I watched them walk up and down with Dad pointing at holes and piles of mud and Charlie plodding along, looking down. They weren't back in 5 minutes or 10 or 15. No joy, said Dad when they reappeared. Guess what I'm doing tomorrow? Next morning, Dad was out in the garden with a spade searching. At first, Charlie was with him, poking at the soil with a garden cane. I watched from the doorway. Maybe I putted it here, he said. Or here, or here, or. That's enough, Charlie, said Dad. Time to go in, please. But No, inside now. When Dad uses that voice, even Charlie knows it's serious. Dad hadn't been out there very long when we heard him shout. Bingo! Through the window we saw him grinning, holding up a medal. One more to find. But the last one didn't want to be found. He was out there while we went swimming. He was out there until Mom called him in for lunch. And he went out again afterwards. I found him later at the table drinking tea. What you been doing, Daddy? Said Charlie. Looking for Granddad's medal, silly, I said. Did you find it, Dad? Nope, he said. Not a sniff. Charlie sniffed loudly and started to laugh. But it didn't last long because Mom gave him one of her strict looks. I wonder if there's another way, said Mom. How's that then? Said Dad. Get a digger in. Not exactly, said Mom. Didn't Alan say he used to go metal detecting? Slowly, Dad put down his tea. You're right, he said. You're a genius, I'll call him now. Alan is one of our neighbors. He lives with his wife, Sheila, and they are always in their front garden when I walk to school, planting flowers or mowing the lawn. Alan came round and brought his metal detector. Have you seen one? They look like a plate on the end of a stick. You put these headphones on and wave the stick around, and it helps you to find stuff underground. Thanks for coming, Alan, said Dad. I couldn't live with myself if we lost his aircrew medal. Aye, that's a good un, said Alan. Once, when I was walking past Alan and Sheila's house, I asked Mum why Alan says aye instead of yes. But I must have said it too loud because Alan smiled, put down his trowel, and told me that's how they talk where he comes from, in God's own country. God's country? What heaven? I asked. Have you been dead? I come from Yorkshire and it is a lot like heaven, only it's a bit handier for the motorway. I had no idea what he was talking about. I'm from up north, he said, where the people say GRS instead of GRRs. Now then. Mary rode on an ass in the Bible. I know that because they told us at school. An ass is a type of donkey, but arse is a rude word for bottom. Why was Alan talking about donkeys and grass and bottoms? I gave up trying to understand. Very soon Alan was out in our garden with his headphones on. I wondered if he was listening to Taylor Swift. She's my favorite. Just like Dad, he was out there for ages. Charlie and I sat on the step watching him. Just as I was getting bored, he bent down, dug about a bit with a spade and picked something up. It didn't look like a medal. It looked like a bit of old shoe. It's probably from a fox, I shouted. We have loads of them. Not this one, lassie, said Alan. Give your dad a shout, will you? I fetched Dad while Alan kicked off his muddy wellies and came into the kitchen. Have you found it, fella? Asked Dad. Can't say that I have, said Alan, but it's still worth a gander. Here we go again. A gander is a boy goose. Mrs. Schofield told us that. But if this dirty thing was worth a gander, like Alan said, how much is that? 1 pound? 20 pounds? I've never tried to buy a goose, have you? Dad and Mum gathered around while Charlie and I stood on chairs for a better look. The dirty object he'd found was a bag. Alan used his thumbs to push bits of soil off it and unpicked a piece of cord that tied it closed. He tipped the bag and a handful of coins slid out onto the table. Treasure, shouted Charlie. Easy there, flour, said Alan. Let's see what we've got. Penny, 1914, he said, peering at the first coin. Another penny, 1922, they're all pennies, he said. I counted quickly. 1, 2, 3, 9 pennies? I said. That's not even enough for a finger of fudge. Steady on now, said Alan. Some of these are worth a few quid, I reckon. We've got some here from Queen Victoria and a couple older than that. You should get them valued. Tom, you might be a happy man. Well, well, said Dad. I can't say I'm happy about losing the medal, but this is a bit of a result, isn't it, gang? Later, after Alan had left carrying his metal detector and a pack of beer that Dad had given him to say thanks, we all looked at the coins again and Dad gave them a wipe with a cloth. Where are we going to keep them? Asked Mum. That leather bag is falling apart. We need to put them somewhere out of harm's way. She looked hard at Charlie. Stick 'em in the metal case for now, said Dad. They'll fit where that missing one should go. Mum opened the metal case. She frowned and looked a little more closely. I leaned over. There, sticking out between the case and the shiny blue metal holder inside, was a small piece of black, blue, and yellow ribbon. Mum used her fingernail to hook it out from behind the holder. Attached to the ribbon was Granddad's missing star medal. Mum swung it gently from her finger until Dad noticed. You've got to be kidding me, he said. He walked up behind Charlie and put his arms around him. Looks like the booty was right under our noses all along. And we found a little bit more along the way, didn't we, Charlie? Maybe I won't throw you to the sharks just yet, my little pirate friend.